Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Have you guys heard of a website called Picrew or Picrew? I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but I'll put it on the screen right here. And basically, it's kind of like an image maker in a sense, but it's in the style of like paper doll layering, where you can kind of put different parts on one another and customize them to kind of create a character or an image. So I have this one right here that was on kind of like the front page of their website. So I'm just showing you guys the customizability that you can have. But today I am going to attempt to make my own for today. So what you're about to see right here is actually the finished version, but I'm going to be showing you guys kind of the behind the scenes plus a lot of the, I guess like the back end stuff in terms of drawing each of the individual parts alongside with like uploading for icons and all that stuff. So I do apologize that the screen's going to be a very vibrant neon green for a long portion of the video, but about only half of the video is actually going to be showing the process of making my own little Picrew, and you guys will be able to use it as well and make a bunch of characters if you wish. I do apologize in advance that it's not the most well fleshed out Picrew out there. It's very rough, and I do regret choosing, I believe I was using like the 6B pencil or something for the actual like line work, and I didn't realize the texture was going to bother me, because my initial intention was that if I use something like the 6B pencil where it has a lot of texture, then I wouldn't spend so long making things look pristine and very clean, but it kind of backfired a little bit. But let's talk about the drawing process just a little bit before we get into the other parts. I did not end up recording, or I forgot to record the actual initial planning portion where I was sketching out the potential base for the kind of like template. And then I showed you guys doing the eyes a little bit, where I did, I think, up to 10 different colors for the eyes. And then right here, I am kind of planning out the hair. So I wanted to split the hair into kind of like a minimum of 4 pieces. So we're going to have the bangs, or the front portion of the hair, or the fringe, depending on what you like to call it. And I think this is when I started to realize that this was going to be a very painful and tedious process, because once we get into the coloring portion for every individual item, if you want to make like variations of hair color, you're going to have to save those as individual parts as well. So it does make things a little bit annoying in terms of like layer organization. So I did not end up making as many hairstyle options available, which I do apologize about, because if anything, it would have been nice to have like as much as I could possibly make, but this took me way longer than anticipated. I ended up spending probably an entire week just trying to map things out, alongside with trying to figure out the interface, along with the drawing and changing up the colors and making sure that things somewhat matched up. So in the future, if I do plan to make a new one and make it a little bit more polished, and maybe I'll find a different way that I can simplify it where I don't dislike it as much, but I think there's probably a way that I can kind of streamline the process so it's a little bit less painful, because the layers that I had in my folders was just way too many, and you can kind of see me flipping through the many different bangs. I think I have like 13 options, maybe. And for each of those, I have to color them individually. And I decided to stick with cel shading for these because I wanted to be able to alpha lock the layers after layer clipping each component to kind of like the main color, which will be kind of like the mid-tone gray here, or black. Then I would have a layer for the shadows and then a layer for the highlights. So on the left side, you can see all my layer organization. So all the little red layers on the side are actually the ones that have my line art on. Everything in between is the base color, the highlight color, and the shadow color. So I organized it in this way so that when I copy and paste my folders, I can actually just adjust each color by I guess like Control F or like filling everything in. So I do warn you that this part might get a little bit flashy, so I do apologize. I'll make sure to let you guys know when the kind of flashing stops, because I did want to show me kind of flipping through the layers and ending up with how I'm filling them individually to get different hair colors. Now, a little bit later, I will figure out that there is a way to adjust an entire folder using the like hue and saturation. You can also change the, I believe, like the tonal curve, I guess, so you can make things a little bit lighter and darker and kind of like separate them a little bit more naturally. So I'll learn about that later, and it makes it a lot easier for myself instead of having to go to each individual layer. Oh, you can kind of see that I'm doing it right here. Also, the flashing has stopped, so if you had to look away for a little bit, hopefully it returns back to normal by this point. But I was able to fiddle around with these kinds of, I don't know what you call them, but they're basically new layers that are set to the folder, and you can have all your normal kind of like color correction layers that you had previously if you only selected one layer. And this made it a lot easier for me to adjust an entire set of bangs all at once without having to manually fill everything. So after I did that, I still had to manually fill every other one because I did not want to write down all the values or try to match my tonal curves. But this becomes a lot easier because I was able to just color pick afterwards and fill in the left side hair part that frames the face. Then I did the right side by just flipping and mirroring, and then after that I'm doing kind of the back scalp-ish area for the hair. So I could have just stopped here and just left it as is afterwards with I think only a few different hair combinations at this point. So I did some with a shorter length, a longer length. I tried to add I think 2 curly options or a wavy option, and tried to vary up the lengths so that you have different combinations with your bangs and any of the hair that's framing the face, alongside with some extra hair if you wanted to do like, I guess like kind of space buns, ponytail, pigtails, whatever you want for what I did include for this kind of little template. So I mentioned earlier that because I was struggling with the kind of like layer organization and it was getting very tiring trying to make sure that I have enough variations for everything, I have to make sure the colors match for each part. I did not include a lot of the things that I wanted to include initially, but as a first attempt, I think it was kind of a good kind of like breakthrough into learning how to do this. I definitely think the layer management and the way how I have to break down the parts is, I don't know, maybe it's because I dislike the process, but it's more tedious than when I had to fix my VTuber for rigging. So I don't know if that just says more about me or if this process just truly is more tedious. But for now, we're working on the clothing. So the clothing, I've seen other people do it where you can layer clothing up. So like you could do different jackets, you can do different shirts, tank tops, scarves, anything, accessories and stuff. But because I was low on energy, I decided just to make like a few outfits. Or not even outfits, I guess they're like tops for the character. So I apologize that there's not very much color variation. I made a lot of them more neutral toned so that hopefully they fit a little bit more easily with some of the other color palettes. Because if I made only like, let's say a blue hoodie, a pink top, like a green, I don't know, vest or something, I feel like it's a little bit hard to mix and match. But the purpose of this was, I've seen people use like Picrews before in the past to kind of like make it easier to make new OCs. So I think people used to make these as like an icon maker, but a lot of people would make them to make their own characters or their personas and stuff. And I think that was like a very fun idea. And I've seen this like several years back. But I think the end of last year, one of my friends found the Picrew and made a template on Instagram for us to make a bunch of, I think like magical characters for her like little magical school AU type thing. And I made a character named Selwyn, which I'll introduce in another video once I flesh him out a little bit more. But I think it's like a fun way to make characters that maybe you typically wouldn't make, maybe because you wouldn't draw those kinds of hairstyles or clothing, or you just don't do a lot of the different kind of mix mixing and matching that you can do like in Picrew. So I find it a great way to kind of give yourself inspiration for like making new characters if you wanted to, or just to play around in general. But back to the process. So we are on the exporting phase. So basically for each individual part, I did this very simply. There is also a way that you have to set your components in a way that you're able to rotate and kind of like resize, and you know how it's going to rotate and resize because you have like an access point. But I did not do that. I just kind of saved each individual part where they were actually set on my drawing so that I didn't have to reformat how I was saving each individual part. But this part was also very tedious. You can see that as I was importing each individual part, they'll show up kind of like in this preview window that you can kind of open, and some of these parts have color variations, and there's a lot of things that say no image, which actually we are going to fill in just a second, because you need to import your icons alongside with like smaller versions of your each individual part. So for the backgrounds, I'm going to quickly show you guys that there's on the left side, there's an icon place that says no image. So you can go ahead and click on to your little part, click edit, and you can actually add a kind of like icon for the image so that people know what they're clicking on. Otherwise, you can see on here on the preview, it's going to be very hard to tell what is what here. So I believe from what I've been reading and watching in terms of how to make a Picrew is that the site actually has updated itself to be much more manageable and very straightforward and easier to navigate. And I think they made it much easier for you to upload things like icons or like bulk uploading and all that stuff, so things become very orderly. So I'm going ahead and selecting icons for everything alongside with these little mini I guess like header icons, so you know what part you're actually customizing. And a very popular way that I've seen people do this is that the highlighted part that you're kind of working on is done in red, and then every other part will be kind of like neutral colored. So the red portions you can see here, it basically acts like an icon for each category. So right here is the backgrounds, the one next to it is skin tone, after that we have ears, then eyes, eyebrows, nose, mouth, etc. So just easier for people to navigate. Some people make this really simple, some people make it actually more aesthetically pleasing, but for the sake of this one, I'm going to leave it as is, being very simple. So I'm going ahead and trying to make a character. I already really like the combination of kind of this weird grayish green eye color, which I actually really like, with the skin tone alongside with just kind of more warmer blackish brown hair. So I'm kind of playing around to see what kind of hairstyle I like on this character, alongside if I wanted to give them longer or shorter hair, if I wanted to give them more kind of like full bangs, or if I wanted to give them more of this comma swoop that I have going for her. And then for the outfits, I decided to go with the black jacket and the tank top, and then I have this little set of flowers. So for the remainder of the video, I actually wanted to take some time and actually draw out the character and flesh her out just a smidge, just because I want to see whether or not I want to keep this character and maybe place her into Masuki's story at some point. I'm kind of leaning towards making her like Sato's friend, because I feel like they're both like girls, if that makes sense. So for this character, I'm kind of using the Picrew image creator thing icon that I just currently made, and kind of using that as inspiration for the character. So I'm still following kind of closely with how the Picrew made the character, but there are going to be some small adjustments here and there. So yeah, I'm not going to follow it 100% to a T. There's going to be like things like the hair is not going to be 100% the same, but it just kind of gives you a nice starting point, which, like I said, in the future, I will introduce another OC named Selwyn, and he's basically going to be part of I guess like a magical school of some sort, because I'm not sure if my friend's gonna end up making the story or if it was just like 100% just, you know, kind of from a whim. So I might just develop my own little headcanon for him and all that, because I do have like his personality and like a few other things fleshed out, just because she did make a template with like I think their animal of choice, their, I think, personality, magical powers, and like all this stuff. So I do kind of have that for him already, and hopefully I'll draw him more in the future because he's definitely a character type, I feel like, that's going to be more fun to draw just because it's fantasy related rather than just purely like slice of life-ish of like living in the real world, if that makes sense, which is kind of like where Masaki's story kind of takes place in for the most part. I'm gonna be seeing if I can think of a name for this character though, because I do like her aesthetic, and I feel like if she has more of that, I don't know, punk or biker vibe maybe, because initially, I don't know, a lot of my characters are like kind of melding into my brain at this point just because with Kaisen and I think Akemi's older brother, he kind of taken the place of the aesthetic that I wanted for Akemi's older brother, and I feel like this girl's also kind of leaning towards what I wanted him to be as well. So I'm going to see which direction I'm going to make for the remainder of my characters that I have left, which technically is 2 more for now, which has to be Akemi's siblings at some point. So yeah, but let's talk about a little bit about process, since it's been at least a little bit since I've done more of a finished piece in Procreate for a video. So after I finished the sketch, I went ahead, set it to multiply, made it a little bit warmer. I duplicated the layer to make kind of like a safety net version, so I kind of hide that and maybe I need to revisit it at some point. After that, I make a new layer, place it underneath, and I laid down kind of a dusty, kind of like steel blue at first, just because I wanted to block in the entirety of the character first, so that way I can alpha lock it and then change the color completely, and then we can kind of paint within that silhouette without having to worry about bleeding everywhere else. So after I was able to kind of alpha locked it, I changed it to a skin tone that I think kind of suits her. Now I realized that both on camera and the finished kind of illustration, she's gonna look a little bit more, hopefully not too sunburnt, but she looks a little bit more reddish orangey, and part of that's because I had the Picrew image of the character on my phone, and I've talked about this in the past. I have a very strong blue light filter on my phone that's always set no matter what, just because it just helps with my eyes every time I look at my phone, and I kind of prefer the warmer aesthetic versus like that kind of weird, uninviting blue. So it kind of made her look a little bit more orangey reddish, and that's what I ended up doing. So I do apologize that she's not gonna match super entirely with the Picrew version, but I kind of like her being on the warmer side though, just because Sato's overall color palette's actually a little bit more cooler. She kind of has that steel blue or more of a blue green versus like more of a warmer blue, alongside with her hair color is kind of fluctuating a little bit between peach and kind of like a softer baby pink. So I'm gonna see if I can kind of make them a little bit more contrasty of characters with one another. But I feel like their personalities would probably match very well. I can kind of see both of them being a little bit more headstrong and a little bit fiery. So I think it'd be kind of cute to put them together as well as kind of like friends. But after that, went ahead and changed the sketch colors to match a little bit closely with some of the base colors, alongside with cleaning up with some of the lines. After that, I merged my sketch with my colors, and we can start to clean up and render, which at this point, I feel like I got over my stupid little, I don't know how do you explain it, my weird little art slump of not wanting to render or kind of finish a drawing. I was in a very like sketching mood, if anything, for the last little portion of last year alongside with the beginning of this year. So I think I'm out of that little art funk, and we can go back to actually doing more finished illustrations, which I think for next week, I want to go through the entire process on how I usually plan out illustrations, if I do have like a full concept that I want to kind of flesh out in a sense, because it's been a little bit since I've actually done proper planning, looking for references, doing thumbnail sketches, maybe a rough sketch, and then doing a final illustration at the very end. And part of that might be also me planning to churn out more drawings rather than focusing on what I really want to draw and flesh out to be a drawing that I'm proud of. So hopefully that's probably going to be a kind of a shift for this year. I'm kind of hoping and planning, because actually I probably won't delve into it in this video. Maybe I'll talk about it in next week's video, just because I've kind of like talked about it quite a bit in different videos here and there. So maybe it'll be easier for me to talk about that in a video where it's like relating to it. But for the little process right now, so I ended up making her hair also warmer. So I was kind of leaning towards making her have more like a green black kind of hair color, or if I wanted to lean her completely kind of like purple and more warm. So I did do more of a brownish and purple undertone for the majority of her hair. But later on, unless I included it here, I'm not too sure, but I added kind of more of that green or turquoise color back into her hair color a little bit, because I do have kind of subtle muted greens for her overall color palette. So I wanted to add it a little bit into her hair as well, because it looked a little bit too monochromatic for my taste. So I'll probably play around with it a little bit, and maybe I'll leave kind of that turquoise kind of emerald green color into the bottom of her hair for just like character design wise. I think it could be fun. But maybe in the future as well, if you guys end up making a few characters or so in the little Picrew that I made, which I will make sure to link it probably in the pinned comment alongside with the description. But if you end up tagging me somewhere, probably on Instagram or Twitter, maybe I will take some time to draw some of them out, because it could be fun to do and interpret a little bit. I do apologize that it's probably not the most customizable in terms of the characters, so I feel like some people are going to end up with very similar looking characters. But I think we are kind of nearing the end of this drawing, which I don't know. I really like this one. I'm gonna see if I'm gonna keep her or not. We'll see if she just becomes a one-off or she's gonna join the rest of Masaki and gang, I guess. But hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. Hopefully you also enjoyed the little Picrew that I made, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!